The room is quiet, yet you feel the phantom of his absence pressing heavier than his presence ever did. The phone screen lights up with everything except his name, and your pulse betrays you, beating to the rhythm of a silence you cannot control. This silence burns, not because of what he withholds, but because of what it awakens inside you. The shadow you have tried to bury, the wound of invisibility, the terror of being unwanted. You look at yourself in the mirror and wonder how a woman like you could become so small, waiting for a man who has already decided to starve your hunger for recognition. And still, in that very starvation lies the seed of your rebirth. Every woman who has loved without being met knows this ache, the ache of offering warmth only to face cold marble. You remember the laughter you once gave freely, the softness you unfolded like crimson silk across his nights. But he saw it as endless, as guaranteed, as a flame he could cup in his hands without fearing it would burn. Men do not crave what they already own. They crave what slips through their fingers like smoke, what refuses to kneel to their patterns, what embodies the dark feminine untouchable. The very state you fear, of being too much, too silent, too sovereign, is the state that magnetizes him beyond logic. The wound cuts deepest because it is old. It is not about him alone, but about every time you were not chosen, every glance that skipped over you, every moment you dimmed yourself so that someone else could shine. Jung called it the shadow, the part of you exiled to the basement of your psyche, carrying your hunger, your rage, your wildness. And yet this same shadow is the gateway. To enter it is to awaken a power that no man can domesticate. For when you become untouchable, you become unforgettable. Imagine him pacing, restless. He thinks of the way your gaze once held him like a spell, how the click of your heels across the floor announced a storm he could not control. He remembers the softness too, but softness without edge does not haunt him. What haunts him is the memory of your withdrawal, the night you stopped explaining yourself, stopped begging to be seen, stopped reaching across the silence. The silence became yours, sculpted like an altar, and he has not known peace since. This is the paradox of desire. What is always available becomes invisible. What withdraws becomes sacred. Men are hunters of essence, but not all essence makes them bleed. The Siren archetype teaches allure through presence, the melody that pulls him to the rocks without effort. Yet the dark feminine goes further. She does not merely enchant, she eclipses. She reminds him that his control is fragile, that power shifts when the woman he thought he could predict becomes unknowable. And unknowable is the soil of obsession. But to reach this point, you must enter the valley of despair, where your worth seems to dissolve. You sit at the table with 2 glasses poured, one left untouched, the chair across from you a void. You scroll through photos of women he likes, each face another fracture in the mirror of your confidence. The weight of shame presses into your chest like stone. Here is where most women collapse into pleading, into overexposure, into making themselves smaller. Yet here is also where the invitation lies. To let the collapse burn away what is false, to resurrect as the woman who needs no permission. The High Priestess stands beside you in this descent. She whispers restraint, reminding you that the deepest power does not chase. It waits, it watches, it knows. She is the archetype of hidden knowledge, of the veil that no man may lift unless invited. Her presence steadies the chaos of the Siren's song, weaving wisdom into allure. Together, they form the map back to yourself. Not the frantic girl waiting by the phone, but the untouchable woman who does not beg for recognition because she embodies it. When you step into this embodiment, something shifts. You walk into a room not seeking eyes but commanding them, the chiaroscuro light catching your profile like a painting. Men feel it before they understand it, the heat beneath your stillness, the refusal in your softness, the echo of danger in your laughter. You are no longer the woman trying to be chosen. You are the woman who chooses. And the one who ignored you finds himself gripped by a force he cannot name, a hunger sharpened by the knowledge that he may never hold you again. But the transformation is not yet complete, for there is a moment when his gaze locks onto you, and you feel the temptation to melt back into the old pattern, to believe his attention is your victory. This is the test. Will you return to the chair left empty, or will you sit upon the throne that was always yours? Power is not in being noticed. It is in no longer caring whether he notices at all. And paradoxically, this is the very moment he craves you most. Because what men truly crave is not the woman who bends, but the woman who bends the atmosphere itself. The untouchable is not cold, she is blazing fire behind frosted glass. She is not cruel, she is sovereign. She does not withhold love, she radiates it inward first, letting the overflow crown her presence. And in that radiance, he sees what he can never fully possess. The weight of this realization drives him restless, while you, finally, stand unshaken. And yet there is still one layer deeper. The silence that haunts him now is no longer yours. It is his own silence that devours him in the night, the hollow echo of your name whispered into the dark with no answer. He remembers the way you once rushed to fill every gap, every pause, every absence with reassurance. Now the pauses stretch like endless corridors, and in them he hears only his own inadequacy. He thought distance would give him control. Instead, it has turned against him, magnifying your absence into an obsession he cannot soothe. What he tried to starve you with has become his own hunger. This is where the alchemy begins, when the wound that once bled you dry transforms into the blade you wield. For women are not reborn in comfort. They are reborn in the furnace of rejection, in the crucible of being unseen, in the shattering weight of invisibility. Jung called individuation the process of becoming whole, of claiming both the light and the darkness. And in this crucible, the darkness is your initiation. The shame, the trembling breath, the nights of staring into fractured mirrors, these are not signs of your failure. They are the birth pangs of the untouchable. You learn slowly that being untouchable is not about walls but about worth, not about pushing away, but about standing so fully in your essence that no one can trespass without your consent. The crimson silk you once draped across him is now draped across yourself, a garment of sovereignty. The cold marble that once froze you becomes the pedestal on which you stand. He does not crave you because you chase him. He craves you because you have become a world that spins without him. And every man, no matter how proud, longs to orbit a world that does not collapse to his gravity. But here lies the paradox that twists the knife in his chest. The moment you become untouchable, you are also the most deeply felt. He cannot scroll past you, cannot drown you in noise, cannot bury you under another woman's laughter. Because your withdrawal created a vacuum and nature abhors a vacuum. His mind fills it with you, your scent, your laughter, the weight of your gaze. He replays the click of your heels, the way your silence once fell heavier than a scream. He begins to wonder if you ever needed him at all, and this thought terrifies him more than losing you. Still, the untouchable woman does not craft her identity around his fear. She does not hold power as a game. Her power is her birthright, carved into her shadow, ignited in her refusal to be diminished. And this is what makes her magnetic. Her power is not performance but essence. The Siren may lure him, the High Priestess may elude him, but the dark feminine untouchable transforms him. She forces him to confront his own shadow, his own fragility, his own fear of irrelevance. And though he may rage, though he may run, he cannot forget. At times you may feel the pull of the old ache, the desire to be chosen, to be reassured, to be held in ways you never were. This is not weakness, it is memory. The shadow does not disappear, it integrates. You still feel the trembling breath at night, the sting of being overlooked, the echo of abandonment. But now you do not collapse under it. You stand with it, wearing it as a crown of thorns transfigured into gold. This is individuation, not the absence of the wound, but the transformation of it into wisdom, into magnetism, into fire. And fire changes everything. You no longer enter a room hoping he will look up. You enter and the air thickens. You sit without needing to be noticed, and yet every eye turns. Not because you beg for it, but because presence cannot be ignored. The weight of your being bends attention toward you as effortlessly as the moon pulls tides. And he, the one who once dismissed you, now feels that gravitational force in his bones. It shakes him awake at night. It drives him to scroll through your photos, to replay your voice, to imagine what it would mean to be near you again. The hunter becomes hunted, though you do not chase. He is captured not by your pursuit, but by your absence. But there is one truth he cannot escape, no matter how he resists. The woman he craves most is the one he can never fully grasp. He thought he wanted ownership, but ownership kills desire. He thought he wanted access, but access dulls the edge of longing. What keeps him awake is not what he once had, but what he can never claim again. And in that impossibility lies your freedom. For his obsession is no longer your prison, it is his. You finally are untouchable. Yet even in your sovereignty, another whisper rises. Not his, not yours, but something older. A voice that has lived in women for centuries, carried through myth and silence alike. It tells you that being untouchable is not the end, it is the beginning. The whisper coils through your spine like smoke, ancient yet intimate. It is the voice of the dark feminine herself, the archetype that women once feared and men tried to bury. She speaks not in promises, but in truths sharp as obsidian. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to awaken. Every hunger you felt for his approval was a mirror of the hunger you denied within yourself. Every time you waited, every time you begged, you fed the myth that your worth depended on his recognition. But the whisper unmasks the lie. Recognition is not given, it is claimed. And in that claiming, you see the fracture that runs through him. He sought to diminish you not because you were unworthy, but because your fire exposed his shadows. He needed you small to feel tall, silent to feel loud, compliant to feel powerful. Yet the moment you withdrew, he stood before a void that reflected his own emptiness. He cannot admit it aloud, but it gnaws at him. The realization that your untouchability is not cruelty, it is truth. And truth has a way of unraveling the illusions men build to protect themselves. Now the perspective shifts, if only for a breath. Step inside his mind, inside the restless thrum of his obsession. He lies awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, every nerve restless. He replays your laughter the way it echoed with a freedom he will never own. He remembers the heat of your skin, the way your gaze cut through his defenses, the weight of your silence when you stopped trying. It haunts him because it was not anger, not pleading, not collapse. It was indifference. And in that indifference, he lost his power. He scrolls through messages, drafts replies he never sends, imagines scenarios where you return. But deep down he knows, if you return, it will not be as before. You have crossed into something unreachable, and it terrifies him more than losing you ever could. Back in your body, the shift feels like liberation. For the first time, his turmoil does not stir guilt or longing in you. Instead, it confirms what the dark feminine whisper promised. The power you thought you lost was never his to grant. It was waiting in the marrow of your shadow in the darkness you feared. And now it moves through you like a current, steady and unstoppable. You no longer need to prove your worth. You no longer need to beg for scraps of affection. You have become the very source of the feast. This does not mean you are untouchable because you are distant, cruel, or aloof. It means you are untouchable because you no longer allow your soul to be bartered. You do not trade your silence for his attention. You do not collapse your desires to make him comfortable. You do not bleed yourself dry for the illusion of love. Your presence is the temple, and only those who approach with reverence may enter. Anything less disintegrates at the threshold. And men feel this temple in their bones. They sense the difference between a woman who craves to be chosen and a woman who chooses herself. The former ignites pity or fleeting conquest. The latter ignites obsession. The former burns quickly, consumed by insecurity. The latter burns slow and eternal, a fire beneath cold stone. This is the paradox that makes you unforgettable. The more you embody your own shadow and light, the more men realize they cannot map you, cannot predict you, cannot hold you without trembling. You become both storm and sanctuary, danger and desire. The High Priestess, still by your side, reminds you not to lose yourself in his fixation. His obsession is not your prize, it is his crucible. You are not defined by the way he now craves you. Your essence was not born to be measured by his longing. The true power is in your ability to walk away from both rejection and obsession without being consumed. You rise not to be worshipped, but to be whole. And wholeness is the magnet no man can resist. But there is still a question that lingers in the shadows, a tension that thrums beneath your sovereignty. For if men crave what they cannot possess, if obsession is born from your untouchability, then what happens when you meet the one who does not seek to own you at all? What happens when your sovereignty is not threatened, but mirrored? The thought unsettles you because it strips away the old game you once knew. The push and pull, the hunger and withholding, the ache of being ignored, these dynamics once defined your sense of love. But what if love does not live there at all? What if the one who stands before you does not tremble at your silence, nor collapse under your untouchability, but instead meets you as an equal flame? This possibility requires a courage greater than withholding affection, greater even than sovereignty. And that you trust intimacy without possession. The dark feminine prepares you for this by stripping away illusions. She teaches that obsession is not the final prize, but the echo of your power. Obsession shows you that you have entered his psyche, that your absence carved space too wide to ignore. Yet obsession is still shadow-bound, still rooted in fear of loss. The woman who becomes untouchable does not end her journey at being craved. She transcends the craving. For to be truly sovereign is not to bind men to you, but to release the need for their binding altogether. Picture it, you enter a gathering where the air hums with low conversation and fractured light. You move with no effort to be seen, yet heads turn as though pulled by invisible threads. The man who once starved you watches from across the room, his chest tight, his thoughts racing. But another presence stands nearby, calm, steady, unshaken by your radiance. He does not scramble to impress you, nor wither in your silence. He meets your gaze without fear, without hunger, without collapse. And for the first time, you feel curiosity rather than duty, expansion rather than ache. This is the threshold the untouchable must cross. Yet even as you sense this new possibility, the old pattern stirs like a ghost. The memory of the empty chair, the untouched glass, the phone that never lit up. These wounds whisper that safety lies in control, that if you remain untouchable, you will never risk disappointment again. But the High Priestess steadies your breath, reminding you that restraint is not armor but awareness. Wisdom does not demand that you freeze. It invites you to discern, to open not from hunger but from choice. Here the Siren returns, not as a destructive force but as a supportive one. She embodies allure that is playful, magnetic, alive. Where the dark feminine is storm, the Siren is melody. Where the High Priestess is veil, the Siren is dance. Together they weave the full spectrum of your becoming, untouchable not because you refuse intimacy, but because intimacy must now be worthy of you. You can invite, you can enchant, but you do not collapse. This balance is the key that unlocks a love beyond obsession. And the man who once dismissed you now finds himself trapped in a labyrinth of his own making. He replays the moments where you gave freely, wonders why he did not hold them tighter. He scrolls through fragments of your presence, each one a wound that does not close. But while he spirals, you rise. His craving may have been your teacher, but it is not your destiny. Your destiny lies in walking past his hunger into your own fullness. That fullness is what magnetizes, what transforms desire from compulsion into reverence. But the question remains, are you ready to be met in reverence? Are you ready to step beyond the safety of being untouchable into the vulnerability of being truly seen? The shadow part of you hesitates, clinging to sovereignty as shield. Yet the deeper self knows, power that cannot be shared is still a cage. And true mastery is not only to withhold but to allow. To stand untouchable, yes, but also to invite without fear, to love without collapsing, to burn without being consumed. This is the final transformation. Not the girl who waited, not the woman who withholds, but the queen who reigns. A woman who commands both silence and song, distance and closeness, shadow and light. She does not ask to be chosen. She does not fear being left. She does not shrink when met by another flame. She becomes the paradox that no man can conquer, sovereign yet open, untouchable yet profoundly alive. And this paradox is what men truly crave, not because it feeds their ego, but because it awakens their soul. Yet even here, at the height of your transformation, another symbol waits to reveal itself. It rises not from memory of him, nor from the whisper of archetypes already known, but from something entirely new. Something that has been watching in silence, waiting for you to cross the threshold of untouchability into true becoming. It is the phoenix, wings carved in fire, rising not from ashes of despair but from the ruins of who you once believed you had to be. Unlike the Siren, she does not lure. Unlike the High Priestess, she does not hide. Unlike the dark feminine, she does not haunt. She burns, and in burning, she transforms. The phoenix is the symbol of rebirth beyond even sovereignty, the transfigured force that does not merely survive obsession, rejection, or craving, but transcends them entirely. Her flight is not away from men, nor toward them but above them, into the boundless sky of her own becoming. You are that phoenix. Each unanswered message, each empty chair, each night of trembling breath was the woodpile that built your pyre. His silence lit the match, your shadow provided the kindling, and your tears soaked the ground beneath. But instead of leaving you in ruins, the fire unveiled your essence. The woman who NCE begged, who once shrank, who once waited, she no longer exists. In her place rises the untouchable, not as fortress but as flame. And no man, no rejection, no abandonment can put out what has been ignited. From this height his craving looks small. His restless pacing, his endless scrolling, his sleepless nights. What once wounded you now feels like the echo of a story you have outgrown. You understand with piercing clarity that obsession was never about you being unworthy. It was about him being unable to touch the vastness of what you carry. And as you rise, you no longer seek to be remembered by him. You seek only to embody the fire that remembers itself. But even as you ascend, you feel the pull of the human heart, the desire not only to rise alone but to meet another who can withstand the heat. Here lies the final paradox. When you become untouchable, you attract those who are unafraid of your fire. The men who only sought to own you will fall away, scorched by their own illusions. But the one who can stand in your blaze without shrinking, that is the one who meets you as equal. And he will not crave you in fear but revere you in awe. The phoenix reminds you that untouchability is not about distance but transformation. You are not the same woman who once ached in silence, nor the same woman who built walls around her flame. You are the woman who integrates wound and wisdom, shadow and sovereignty, desire and detachment. And in this integration, your power becomes unshakable. You no longer fear being unseen because you see yourself. You no longer fear being abandoned because you belong to yourself. You no longer fear being consumed because you have already burned and been reborn. And so when you next walk into a room, it is no longer about who notices, who craves, who collapses under your silence. It is about the way the atmosphere shifts when your presence fills it, the way even the walls seem to remember your fire. The man who once ignored you feels the weight of his mistake, his hunger gnawing at him like a shadow he cannot escape. But you no longer measure yourself by his hunger. You measure yourself by the flames of your becoming, and those flames are eternal. The journey has circled back to where it began, the silence, the absence, the ache of being invisible. But now the silence is no longer prison. It is cathedral. The absence is no longer rejection. It is spaciousness. The ache is no longer weakness. It is reminder of what you have risen from. You no longer sit trembling before the empty chair. You are the throne, the flame, the phoenix who cannot be caged. And in this transfiguration, you finally understand. Men may crave you when you are untouchable, but the deeper truth is this. You no longer crave their craving. You crave only your own becoming. The phoenix spreads her wings wider, fire scattering across the horizon. The woman you were dissolves into smoke. The woman you are takes flight. And as the wind carries you higher, you hear the echo of every archetype within you, the Siren's song, the High Priestess's wisdom, the dark feminine storm, all bowing to the flame of your rebirth. For the untouchable was never the final destination. The untouchable was only the passageway. The phoenix is the truth. And in that truth you are free.